Welcome to the Tulip Christian Church podcast, where we hope to inspire and strengthen your relationship in Jesus Christ. We encourage you to love Jesus and love people. Now, let's get to this week's sermon.
Good to be here with you again this morning. I need your help, okay? I need your help. You got to participate out of the gates here, okay? We're all going to get in gear to be participators in this sermon, all right? So I wonder if my lovely wife will turn to the first slide here. If you can help me with something, does anybody know what those are? Anybody know what those are? Now, if you cheated at home and saw them, don't answer. But if you didn't, then you can offer a guess or an answer. What is it? What are those? Glasses. Okay. But there's a special kind of glasses. Does anybody know? What are these? Come on. I know this is kind of a wrestling community. They're sports related, not wrestling. Brennan, what do you got? Safety glasses. They could be safety glasses. The funny thing is there's no lens in them. There's like nothing to protect you there in the top. That's just an open, vacant space. Nobody knows what these are. Blinders. What do you use these for, Chance? Blinders for what? How did you know that? Trust the tallest guy in the church to know about basketball things, okay? They're blinders. I don't know if they still do it. I don't think they do because at some point in time over the history of my growing up, they stopped teaching fundamentals in sports. But back in the day, we used to pull a whole bunch of sweaty, nasty pairs of these out of this mesh bag, and all of us put them on, and then we had to dribble basketball up and down the court, and it was supposed to keep you from looking at the basketball. It's supposed to keep your eyes up and focused on what was ahead of you so you could see the play developing in front of you. You can see where your teammates were, and you would feel the basketball. Like you would trust that the basketball was right there. You get a feel for it. You wouldn't have to even look at it. You could dribble around and switch hands and do all kinds of things. Now, I was never the greatest of dribblers, but because I was small, I dribbled better than most. And I finally got to where I could dribble two basketballs at once with these blinders on, never looking at the basketball. But I always trusted that the basketball was there. Like I had faith and confidence that it was going to be there and that it was going to come right back to me. Each and every time. And that worked 99% of the time. Now, I also grew up in the era of dead basketball gymnasium floors. And so every once in a while, you'd be making a perfect drive, not looking at the ball, and all of a sudden it would just leave you. Like you just leave the ball behind, and that faith thing would run out that place. That's not what happens in the economy or the sports of God. And God's not asking us to be blind in what we do, but He is asking us to live by faith. We're going to continue this morning looking at Abram and his life story. And today we're going to look at this kind of tension between living by sight versus living by faith. How many of you can say that you live totally by faith all the time? No reliance on your own understanding, no reliance on your own abilities, no reliance on what you can see, just total faith all the time. Like you got the blinders on and you're just trusting everywhere you go that God's going to be there, come right back to you. Do you have that kind of faith? That's the faith that God was calling Abram to. Remember, we're working with this definition of faith, right? It's the trust and the belief and the confidence that God is who He says He is, that He will do what He says He'll do, that He will never leave or forsake us, that He'll always be there, that all of His promises, everything that He committed to Abram was going to come true. That's the operating definition of faith that we're working on. But Abram would hit roadblocks and little bumps in the road, a lot like us, like that dead spot in the basketball floor. Pops up once in a while, and it catches us off guard, and it takes us out of stride, right? That's what we're going to be looking at today, is this idea of living by faith, not by sight. And as we enter into chapter 13 of Genesis, we're gonna get to see how Lot comes into the story. We're gonna get to meet him more officially. But just kind of a refresher, just a quick reminder to us of what's taken place thus far. Remember, Abram was called away from his land, away from his people, away from his household and his comforts. Remember, he was said, go away from these things. But he wasn't told where to go or what to take or who to go with. That wasn't communicated to him. And so he had to live by faith. That was our first week. And then last week we talked about the easy road, like that road down to Egypt, like that slippery path. Once you're on the downward path, it's hard to stop. Any of you ever been like hauling a heavy load of firewood or something in a specifically manual transmission vehicle, and you're like going down the path, and you rightly have it in low gear to kind of hold you back, and then you make the mistake. You push on the clutch. What happens? Like it all breaks loose and it just gets to going, and it's hard. It's hard to stop and slow down once the weight and the gravity start working together, pull you down that path. And so the easy road is easy to go down, but it gets increasingly easier. Remember, Abram took things into his own hands. Remember that famine that came up, and he's like, we can't survive here. Got too many livestock, too many people. Got to go somewhere more plush, more fertile. We'll go down to Egypt. That's a beautiful place. There's plenty of greenery there for our livestock. We'll go down the easy path instead of having faith that God was going to provide, even in a famine. Even in a famine. And this week we'll be looking at this concept of living by faith over living by sight. I want to go ahead and just dive right in, and we're going to just kind of take little bite-sized pieces of chapter 13 of Genesis, but we're going to work our way all the way through this chapter this morning, okay? I'm not going to have you here forever, but you'll be here for a minute or two. Well, let's start out right here in verse 1. So Abram went up from Egypt to Negev. Now, there's key number 1. When you go down the easy path, the best thing you can do is go back up the right path, back up the eternal path. Like fix your eyes, like keep your head up, right? Remember those basketball glasses that blind us from the downward path? Like keep our eyes up, fixed on God, up to Egypt, up from Egypt. So they're leaving Egypt with his wife and everything he had, and Lot went with him. Abram had become very wealthy in livestock and in silver and gold. For all practical purposes, Abram had it made. Like this guy he had the wealth. Like, can you imagine having so many livestock, so many people along with you, and then accumulating more in Egypt? Remember, he accumulated more down in Egypt. He's got all these livestock with him. He doesn't have to own land. He has such power and prestige and wealth that he can just move around and graze wherever he wants to, and he can purchase what he needs, and he's just a wealthy guy. He has everything he needs. By world standards, he's well off. He's well off. From the Negev, he went from place to place until he came to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier, and where he had first built an altar. There, Abram called on the name of the Lord. We talked about this returning to God, this calling on the name of God. Like this turning away from his own ways and back to the ways of the Father, the one who was directing his path. Verse 5. Now Lot, who was moving about with Abram, he also had flocks and herds and tents, but the land could not support them while they stayed together. For their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. And quarreling arose between Abram's herders and Lot's. The Canaanites and the Perizzites were also living in the land at that time. You know what happens when we become more and more well off? And when we have more and more possessions? A couple of things occur. We see it pretty routinely. Maybe you experience in your own lives. I think I experience sometimes. As I accumulate things, I want more things. Like, I'll give you a real life example. I've talked about this before. I like Milwaukee power tools. Really like them. They're fun. They're fun to get out. I like to charge the batteries and do all kinds of fun stuff. I'm not that handy of a man, but I like to act like I am with these Milwaukee power tools. But they make like 10 million different power tools. Like every time I think I'm adding to my collection, there's an exponential growth of number of options ahead of me. I'm like, ugh, I need the next pack. I need the next thing, right? Now, fortunately, I've got this balance in my house called Lydia. So she keeps things in check, all right? But I'm pursuing after that. So sometimes as we gain more possessions, we want more possessions. It's hard to reach a point where we're content and have enough. Maybe you've reached that. Maybe I'm alone in the room. But the other thing that happens is when we have a lot, there's a tendency that someone else wants it. And when someone else has a lot, there's a tendency that we might want it. See, we struggle in this tension of being able to just simply be content where we're at, and that's what's happening right here. And so these massive groups of people, Abram's people, all his livestock, his herds, flocks, tents, all of the people, and then Lot's people and his flock and his livestock. And oh, by the way, throw in a couple of other pagan cultures, and they're watching and probably seeing these really wealthy herders moving through their land and thinking, I kind of want what they have. So I think there's a lot of tension in this space. And what happens? Quarreling breaks out. They start bickering and fighting about, hey, who gets to use this well? Who gets access to this water? What about that pasture over there? That's my pasture. No, that's my pasture. They start having these little arguments, right? In verse 8, something pretty cool starts to happen. This is where I see Abram start to take a turn to move away from some of those mistakes of the past into a more upward trajectory with God. Abram says to Lot, let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herders and mine. We are close relatives. Is not the whole land before you? Like, let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. Look what Abram is doing here. Now, Abram is the father of our faith. We've talked about him in that sense a time or two. He's the father, to be the father of many nations, to be the father of all of God's children. That's the promise that's out before Abram. Now, none of that's starting to take shape yet, right? Sarai still hasn't become pregnant. They don't have any children. There's no heirs. That's not starting to materialize, but there's still this promise out there that God has made. And I want you to see something. Abram right here is making peace in a difficult situation. He's making peace with Lot. Now, Jesus spoke to this. He taught this in the Beatitudes. You're familiar with them, but I want you to hear this and think about it in this context. This is Matthew 5:9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Abraham was the father of our faith. He was a child of God, and because he's the father of our faith, we become children of God. And in part, it's because Abram was a peacemaker. He's making peace right here with Lot. Pick it up in verse 10. Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan toward Zoar was well watered. It's like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. And this was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. The two men parted company, and Abram lived in that land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. Now the people of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. Look what's happening here. You see the contrast between faith and sight? Abram says to Lot, look, we're too big for this space. We can't stay here together. So we need to split up. We got to part ways, okay? Look out over the land. There's all this space out here. We've got to split up. Like if you go that way, I'll go this way. And if you go over here, I'm going to go over there. Abram's just saying, it doesn't matter to me where you go. God will provide wherever I go. I'll just go a different way. Abram living by faith. But what's Lot doing? Lot looked around and he saw. He saw that this plain was plush. It was green. It's like our area right now with all of the rains that have come. Like the grass keeps growing, the crops are popping up. It's green. It's nice. Just this beautiful space. And Lot sees that. He's like, I want that. I want that good space out there. It's beautiful. That'll provide for his group. It's like the garden of the Lord. Like Lot is looking out and thinking to himself, man, that looks like Eden. That looks perfect. That's beautiful. Lot's operating by sight. And there's a challenge that comes in that. Lot, in operating by sight, moved his herd, his family, his people, close to this town of Sodom. That would later come back to haunt him. Now, we know the story, right? We know Genesis 19, or we'll become pretty familiar with it in a few weeks. But Lot doesn't have that foresight. But the problem is he doesn't inquire of God. I mean, think of all the things Lot could have done in this very moment, in this communication with Abram. He could have done a lot of things. He could have been grateful. It could have sounded like this. Uncle Abram, you're so generous. Thank you. Thank you for bringing me along on this journey that we're on. Thank you for, even though we had a little bit of difficulty and faced some challenges there in Egypt, you still took care of us and you allowed me to come back up here with you. Thank you for bringing me along in the first place. Thank you for helping me to accumulate all of this livestock that I have. Thank you for taking care of my people, letting me place my tents in the areas where you placed your tents. Thank you for letting me do that. And now thank you for recognizing that we can't have any quarrels between us and that you'll let me go whichever direction. Uncle Abram, you seem wise. Which way do you think I should go? That would have been a relatively intelligent response. That would have been a respectful response. Lot could have dropped to his knees right in that moment and said, I'll go where God sends me. Father, where are you going to send me? God, where do you want to point me? What direction do you want us to go? I don't know if God would have sent Lot to the plain of Jordan. I don't know if he would have sent him into the proximity of Sodom and Gomorrah. I doubt it. I kind of doubt it. I think God's response might have been if they would have just asked, you know what? This is really a nice land. I know that looks good over there. Just have to trust me on this one. Just trust me. Don't go to the east. Just go north or south or west. It's going to be okay. Remember, I can provide for you. Remember, I delivered you out of Egypt. Remember the reminders, all these things. I think that they just would have had a conversation in that moment. It could have gone a little differently for Lot. We'll see how that develops in future weeks with Lot. But he pitched his tent near Sodom. And in going by sight, he put himself in harm's way. Now let's get back to Abram. Let's go back to the man living by faith. Abram's been this wise peacemaker. He has said to his nephew, hey, you decide which way you're going. Once you go, I'm going to pick a different direction. I'm trusting God. I know he's going to be okay. I've built this. I've returned and built this altar. I'm returning to the Lord and calling on his name. In verse 14, the Lord said to Abram, and this is after Lot had parted from him, after Lot had taken all of his flock and all of his people and moved on, the Lord said to Abram, look around. Look around from where you are, to the north, to the south. Don't miss this. To the east, to the west. What was east? Plain of Jordan. Look around you, Abram. Even over there where Lot went, all of this, all of the land that you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever. I'll make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Here's this reminder. Here's this return to the promise. Now, I just wonder how this would have played on Abram's heart every time he heard God say something like, I'm going to give you and your offspring the land. Abram has no offspring. He's an old man by this point, well along in age. His wife is aged also, past childbearing, but I'm going to make you the father of many nations. That's the promise. Just need to continue walking in faith, trusting me, going where I tell you to go, doing what I tell you to do. Continue to be faithful. Stay near these altars. Continue calling out on my name. I want to circle in and bring us to a close here. We're in verse 17. God says this, go walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I'm giving it to you. So Abram went to live near the great trees of Mamre and Hebron, where he pitched his tents. There he built another altar to the Lord. God said, go walk. Abram responded by going in faith, still not possessing any of the land, just completely going on the promise that God would go before him and with him. And everywhere that Abram goes, basically from this point on, he starts to plant these altars, these reminders, these spots where he just worships God for what God is doing. God has just told him, look, I know that you just faithfully gave away some of the possession, some of the promise to your nephew. Don't worry. That's coming back to you. Don't worry. That'll be yours. Just have faith. I told you that we find Abram in the Hall of Faith, right? The Faith Hall of Fame in Hebrews. The author of Hebrews starts out chapter 11, this list of all these people who live by faith by saying this. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. This is what Abram was commended for. That he lived in the space of faith and assurance, trust and confidence that what God said was true. That God would never fail him, that God would never leave him or abandon him, that God would absolutely provide for him everything that he said he would, that he would have offspring, that he would be the father of many nations. Abram continued to live by faith. Lot goes off on this other path of sight. So I want to ask you this morning to think about this. Think about this on your own. Are you living by faith or by sight? And before you hurriedly rush to an answer, you need to examine your heart and your motives. I know that I do. I know I need to think often about later this week when I face a trial or a struggle, am I going to go to my knees seeking the guidance of God? Or am I going to immediately start formulating a solution and a plan for how I can navigate and move through whatever that situation is? Now, is that faith or is that sight? Now, we saw some things happen in this story. Like, is there a brother or sister that you're quarreling with? It shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. Blessed are the peacemakers. That's a faith step. Because when we're in quarrels with our brothers and sisters, and I mean that loosely, it might be immediate family, but it might mean our brothers and sisters in Christ. When we're at odds with our brothers and sisters at Christ, we're off the path of what God wants us on. Like we're walking by sight in that moment instead of faith that He can heal that situation, that He can resolve the difficulties that we're facing. Are we living by faith or by sight? Like I don't know all of the unspoken prayers that were in this room. I know we spoke a few. There's some difficult situations out there. There's some physical needs and healings. There's some things that are just completely faith-based. There's nothing that we can do to heal our own bodies in most cases. We just have to trust that when we bounce that ball, it's going to come back to us. We have to have faith in that. But boy, how often do we dive in and try and take matters into our own hands? Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that medical assistance isn't important and helpful. I think those are blessings from God. I think God made really smart people who are able to do really amazing things through medicine and help and therapies and all those things. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, do we just turn blindly to those things, or do we turn faithfully to those blessings, those promises? And what if the healing doesn't come? Like, what happens? I'm serious. This isn't scare tactics or fear that I'm trying to throw at you. But what if we find ourselves in the middle of war? What if? There's a lot of things going on today that they're just pretty complicated. What if life as we know it changes? Are we going to revert back to our own ways? Or are we just going to be faithful? When you face a situation this week that is hard, it's difficult, will you do me a favor? Will you put on the blinders? Will you just close your eyes? Just for a moment, before you react, before you respond, we just put on the blinders, close your eyes, and just give God an opportunity to speak to you. And then, in His wisdom and His presence, then go on down the path with Him. Will you do that? I'm going to have Becky and Denise come back up and lead us in our final song, a song of invitation. Here's my invitation to you this morning. I do not know what path you're on. I don't know to what extent you're living by faith or by sight. I don't know that. You know that. God knows that. That's between the two of you. But if you want to talk through or pray through that, then I'll just offer to be here with you to do that. If you need to make a decision right now to get on the path that leads to eternity with God, if you need to take that faith step, like, stop trying to fix your world on your own. That's a really flawed approach. It will never work out. Because in our own power, we just make more messes. In our own power, we just enter to more quarrels. The only solution forward is to live by faith and trust God with the rest of the details. So my invitation to you is that if you need to make that decision, you'd come forward now. There's nothing embarrassing. There's nothing embarrassing about walking forward in a church room like this, where I promise you this, there's more people in here who love you and want what's best for you than there are who will look at you funny if you step out in faith. That's true. That's a reality. Like, we don't do these hard invitation times too often, but you need to understand that every time you have an invitation to come closer into the presence and closer into relationship with Jesus Christ, that's the best time to take that faith step. And I know it's awkward. Like Dwayne teased me a couple weeks ago about that I must just be really comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah, it's a little awkward to stand up here and invite you forward, because then I start thinking about, what if they come forward? What am I going to do? Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tell you that I love you. I'm going to hear your prayers. I'm going to pray with you. And then we are just going to faithfully trust God with the rest of the details. That's all we can do. That's the invitation.
Thank you for listening to this week's sermon. If you like this episode and want to get notified each week when we release a new sermon, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or add the Tulip Christian Church podcast to your library. Our hope is that you carry this message with you throughout the week while you spread the word of Jesus Christ.